Don't move. The guard's hand slammed Marcus Johnson against the wall. His cheek hit cold marble. His arms were wrenched behind his back. 10 feet away, Victoria Ashford stood in a silk robe that barely covered her shoulders. Her eyes locked onto his, not with anger, not with fear, but with something that made his blood freeze. Recognition. Like she'd been waiting for someone to walk through that door. Just not him. "Take him," the guard said. "I'm calling the police." Victoria raised one hand. "Stop." Everyone froze. She walked toward Marcus barefoot on the marble until she was close enough that he could see the pulse hammering in her throat. "Who sent you? Comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels." 3 hours earlier, Marcus Johnson had been invisible. That was the gift. The survival skill. The thing that kept a black man employed in the service corridors of a 5-star hotel where guests wore watches worth more than his annual salary. Invisible meant safe. Invisible meant employed. Invisible meant Zoe had food, clothes, and a father who came home every night. 5 years at Monarch Hotels. 0 complaints. 0 incidents. 0 reasons for anyone to remember his name. Until today. Suite 88, Presidential Wing. Security panel malfunction. Gerald Patterson slid a keycard across the desk. His fingers were trembling. Sweat stained his collar even though the office was cold. Marcus didn't touch the card. Presidential Wing requires executive authorization. Already got it. From who? Gerald's eyes darted left. Just do the job, Marcus. The Presidential Wing has its own security team. Why are you sending maintenance? Because I was told to send you. Gerald's voice cracked. Specifically you. The words hung in the air. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. The instinct that had kept him alive through 42 years of being the wrong color, in the wrong place at the wrong time. Who told you? I don't know. The order came from upstairs. Anonymous authorization code. I've never seen one like it before. Gerald pushed the keycard closer. Look, I don't like this either. But if I don't send someone, I lose my job. And if you don't go, we both lose our jobs. Marcus stared at the man. Gerald was 57, divorced, 2 kids in college, mortgage underwater. He wasn't lying about the fear, but he was lying about something. What aren't you telling me? Gerald's jaw tightened. The suite's empty. Guest checked out this morning, in and out, no complications. He paused. And maybe, don't mention I sent you. If anyone asks, you saw the work order in the system yourself. Marcus picked up the keycard. It felt like a loaded gun. The elevator required 3 credentials. Badge, code, keycard. The doors opened onto silence. Marcus had worked every floor of Monarch Hotels, the basement boiler rooms, the mid-level conference centers, the rooftop restaurant where celebrities pretended not to notice the staff. He had never set foot in the Presidential Wing. The hallway stretched before him like a museum after hours. Marble floors, recessed lighting, the kind of quiet that cost money. His work boots squeaked with every step. Suite 88 was at the end. Gold numbers on a mahogany door. Marcus checked the number twice, knocked once. No answer. He swiped the keycard. The lock clicked green. He pushed open the door. The first thing he saw was the mirror, floor length, gilded frame, the kind of thing that belonged in a palace. The second thing he saw was the woman. Victoria Ashford stood before the mirror, her back partially turned. A silk robe hung from one shoulder, exposing the curve of her spine, the bare skin of her neck, the ridge of her collarbone. She was reaching for something on the vanity. She turned. Their eyes met. Marcus's hand was still on the door handle. His heart slammed against his ribs. Once, twice, 3 times. His lungs forgot how to work. His legs turned to concrete. 3 seconds. Maybe 4. An eternity compressed into a handful of heartbeats. Victoria's fingers moved first, pulling the robe closed, slow, deliberate, her eyes never leaving his face. And then she spoke. Not a scream, not an accusation, a question. Who sent you? Marcus opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I asked you a question. Her voice was ice. Who sent you to this room? The work order. I didn't know anyone was... The alarm exploded. Red lights, shrieking sirens. The presidential wing's unauthorized entry protocol triggered automatically. Victoria didn't flinch, didn't cover herself, didn't run. She just stood there watching Marcus with eyes that held something he couldn't name. Heavy footsteps thundered down the corridor. 2 security guards appeared behind Marcus. One of them grabbed his arm, wrenched it behind his back, and slammed him face first into the wall. Don't move. I didn't do anything. Shut up. The second guard stepped toward Victoria, his hand on his radio. Miss Ashford, are you hurt? Do you need medical attention? No. We're calling the police. This man will be detained until... No. The guard hesitated. Ma'am. Victoria walked toward Marcus, barefoot on the cold marble. Her robe secured now, but her hair still loose, still wild from whatever she'd been doing before he'd interrupted. She stopped 3 feet away. Look at me. Marcus turned his head. The guard's grip loosened just enough. Victoria studied his face like she was reading a document, searching for something specific, something hidden. You're terrified, she said quietly. It wasn't a question. Yes. Why? Because I have a daughter, because I need this job, because I know how this looks and I know what happens next. Victoria's expression flickered. Something cracked behind the ice in her eyes. What happens next? You tell them I attacked you. They believe you. I go to prison. My daughter grows up without a father. Marcus's voice broke. I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen to men who looked like me and walked into rooms where they didn't belong. Silence. The guards shifted uncomfortably. Victoria took 1 step closer. What's your daughter's name? The question caught him off guard. What? Your daughter. What's her name? Zoe. She's 6. Who picks her up from school? My mother. She's probably there right now, probably wondering why I'm not answering my phone. Victoria's jaw tightened. She turned to the guards. Let him go. Miss Ashford. I said let him go. The grip on Marcus's arm released. He stumbled, caught himself against the wall. His shoulder throbbed where the guard had wrenched it. Take him to the main security office, Victoria said. Hold him there. I want to review the full access logs before any decisions are made. You want us to review the logs with you? We can have the footage pulled in. No. Victoria's voice cut like a blade. I'll review them alone. You'll wait with him until I'm done. She turned back to Marcus. If you're innocent, the cameras will prove it. If you're not... She paused. Then God help you. She walked past him into the hallway, her bare feet silent on the marble. The guards grabbed Marcus's arms again, gentler this time, but firm. As they led him away, Marcus saw Victoria stop at the door of her suite. She was looking down at something on the floor. Her expression changed. Fear. Real fear. Then she disappeared inside, and the door closed behind her. The security office was a concrete box with fluorescent lights and a camera pointed at a metal chair. Marcus sat in the chair. The guard stood by the door. Nobody spoke. Marcus's phone buzzed in his pocket. He couldn't reach it. His mother. Had to be. Wondering where he was. Wondering why he wasn't answering. He thought about Zoe. About the way she hugged him every morning before school. About the drawing she'd made last week, a stick figure of him with the words, Best Daddy, spelled in crooked letters. About what she'd think when she found out her father was in prison. The door opened. A young woman in a gray suit entered. "Mr. Johnson, Miss Ashford would like to see you in her office." Marcus looked at the guards. They seemed as surprised as he was. "Am I under arrest?" "No, sir." The woman's face was unreadable. "You're being reassigned. Please follow me." Victoria's office was on the top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A mahogany desk the size of Marcus's kitchen. Original artwork that probably cost more than his apartment building. Victoria sat behind the desk, her hair now pulled back, her robe replaced by a black blazer. A laptop was open in front of her. Security footage played on the screen. She didn't look up when Marcus entered. "Sit down." He sat. The footage showed the hallway outside Suite 88. Marcus watched himself approach the door. Hesitate. Knock. Wait. Swipe the keycard. Pause again. "You knocked," Victoria said. "Yes." "You waited for an answer." "The work order said the suite was empty. I was checking." "You hesitated before opening the door." "Why?" Marcus thought about it. "Something felt wrong. I couldn't explain it. But I needed the job, so I went in anyway." Victoria paused the footage. She looked at him for the first time since he'd entered. "Do you know why I believe you? Because the cameras show I knocked?" "No." She turned the laptop toward him. "Because of this." The screen showed a different timestamp. 47 seconds before Marcus reached the hallway. The camera feed cut to static. "Someone hacked the system," Victoria said. "They created a 47-second window where the cameras were blind. Long enough for someone to enter my suite, do what they needed to do, and leave before you arrived." Marcus felt cold. "Someone was in there before me." "Yes. And they used your keycard access to mask their own entry. When you opened that door, the system registered you, not them." Victoria closed the laptop. "You weren't supposed to find me changing clothes, Mr. Johnson. You were supposed to find me dead." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. "What? Or worse." Victoria's voice was flat. "The scratch on my floor. The position of my safe. The modified access codes. Someone has been planning this for weeks, maybe months, and they used you as their alibi." "Why would someone want to hurt you?" Victoria laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. "I own a $2 billion hotel chain. I've fired executives who embezzled millions. I've rejected merger offers from men who think no is a negotiating tactic. Take your pick." She stood and walked to the window. "Here's what I know. Someone inside this company compromised the security system. Someone with high-level access and a reason to want me vulnerable. And that someone chose you, a maintenance worker with no connections to anyone important, to take the fall." Marcus's mouth was dry. "What do you want from me?" Victoria turned. "I want you to help me find them." "Tati." Marcus stared at her. "I'm a maintenance worker. I fix broken panels. I don't—" "You have access to the security infrastructure, the cameras, the door logs, the keycard system." Victoria walked back to her desk. "Whoever did this used those systems. They made one mistake. They didn't expect me to survive. They didn't expect me to fight back. And you think I can help you fight? I think you're the only person in this building I can trust." Victoria's eyes locked onto his. "Because you have nothing to gain from my death, and everything to lose." She slid a folder across the desk. "This is a reassignment order. You report directly to me. Same pay. Better hours. Full access to the presidential wing's security systems." Marcus didn't touch the folder. "Why would you trust a stranger?" "Because a stranger is exactly what I need. Someone with no connections to my board, no debts to my executives, no history with my enemies." Victoria paused. "And because you mentioned your daughter before you mentioned yourself." Marcus looked at her. Really looked. Behind the armor. Behind the control. Behind the ice in her voice. He saw something familiar. Fear. The same fear he felt every day. I have one condition, he said. Victoria raised an eyebrow. You're negotiating with me. That takes nerve. My daughter, Zoe. Sometimes my mother can't pick her up from school. If this job means longer hours, bring her here. Marcus blinked. What? Bring her here if you need to. I'll make sure security knows she's welcome. Victoria's voice softened just slightly. Some things matter more than work, Mr. Johnson. Your daughter is one of them. Marcus picked up the folder. He didn't know what he was walking into. He didn't know who was hunting Victoria Ashford. He didn't know if he'd survive the next week. But he knew one thing. Someone had tried to use him as a pawn. And pawns didn't get to stay invisible forever. That night, Marcus sat on the edge of Zoe's bed. She was already half asleep, her sketchbook open on the pillow beside her, a crayon drawing of a castle with too many towers and a figure at the gate. Who's that? Marcus asked, pointing at the figure. The guard, Zoe mumbled. He keeps the bad guys out. Yeah, does he have a name? Not yet. Zoe yawned. I'll figure it out tomorrow. She closed her eyes. Marcus sat there for a long time watching her breathe. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You should have walked away. Marcus stared at the screen. His hand was shaking. But he didn't delete the message. He took a screenshot instead. Because whoever had sent it had just made their first mistake. They'd let him know he mattered. And Marcus Johnson had spent his whole life learning how to survive. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, the phone clutched in his hand. The text message burned in his memory, like a brand. You should have walked away. Someone knew. Someone was watching. Someone had his number. At 4:47 a.m., he gave up on sleep. He made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the screenshot until the words blurred. His mother arrived at 7 to take Zoe to school. You look terrible, she said. Long night. Marcus. She put her hand on his arm. What's going on? He almost told her. Almost let it all spill out, the suite, the woman, the guards, the conspiracy he'd been pulled into against his will. But then Zoe came running into the kitchen, her backpack bouncing, her smile bright enough to light up the room. Daddy, Grandma says we can get donuts after school. Marcus pulled her into a hug, held on too long, breathed in the smell of her shampoo. That sounds perfect, baby girl. Are you okay, Daddy? I'm fine. You're squeezing too tight. He let go, forced a smile. Have a good day at school, okay? Zoe studied his face with those eyes that saw too much. You look scared. I'm not scared. Mommy used to look like that sometimes, before she went to heaven. Marcus felt his chest crack open. His mother took Zoe's hand. Come on, sweetheart. Let's let Daddy get ready for work. They left. The apartment went quiet. Marcus sat there for a long time, holding his coffee cup, thinking about his wife. About the car accident. About the phone call that had ended his old life and started this new one. He'd survived that. He'd survived this too. He got dressed and went to work. The presidential wing was different in daylight. The same marble floors, the same recessed lighting. But now there were people, assistants in heels, executives in suits, a constant hum of activity that made Marcus feel even more out of place than before. The young woman in the gray suit was waiting for him at the elevator. Mr. Johnson, Miss Ashford is expecting you. Has she slept? The woman blinked. Excuse me? Sleep. Has she gotten any since last night? A pause. I don't believe so, sir. Marcus nodded. He understood that kind of night. Coy. Victoria was exactly where he'd left her, behind her desk, laptop open, security footage playing on a loop. She didn't look up when he entered. Close the door. He closed it. Sit down. He sat. For a full minute, neither of them spoke. Victoria's eyes were fixed on the screen, her fingers moving across the keyboard with mechanical precision. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her hair slightly less perfect than the day before, but her focus was absolute. "I found him," she said finally. Marcus leaned forward. "Who?" Victoria turned the laptop toward him. On the screen was a personnel file, a photo of a middle-aged man with gray hair and a forgettable face. Daniel Mercer, executive assistant in the finance department, reported dead in a car accident 3 months ago. Dead. That's what the records say. Except someone has been using his access credentials for the past 6 weeks. Victoria's jaw tightened. Whoever is behind this didn't just hack the system. They resurrected a dead man to do it. Marcus studied the photo. "You think Mercer's still alive?" "I think someone wants me to believe he's dead, whether he's actually in the ground or running this operation from the shadows." She shook her head. "I don't know yet." "What do you want me to do?" Victoria closed the laptop. Mercer had access to the building's security infrastructure before his death. He knew the camera blind spots. He knew the maintenance schedules. He knew when I'd be alone in that suite. "You think he's been watching you?" "I think someone has been watching me for months, and I think they got impatient." Victoria stood and walked to the window. "The question is why? What's the end game? If they wanted me dead, they would have killed me already. If they wanted money, they would have made demands." "So, what do they want?" Victoria turned. Her eyes met his. Control. The next 3 days were a blur. Marcus learned Victoria's schedule, her routines, the names of her assistants, her security detail, the executives who came and went from her office. He also learned her tells, the way she rubbed her left wrist when she was stressed, the way her voice dropped half an octave when she was lying, the way she looked toward the door every time someone knocked, a quick involuntary glance that spoke of years of hypervigilance. She never talked about it, never explained why she jumped at sudden noises or avoided rooms with only one exit. But Marcus recognized the signs. He'd seen them in veterans, in survivors, in people who had learned that the world was not a safe place. By the end of the first week, he had access to every security system in the presidential wing. Cameras, door logs, motion sensors, the digital footprint of everyone who came and went. He also had a growing list of questions. "The night I walked in on you," he said during one of their late-night sessions, "the door was supposed to be locked. How did someone override it from the inside if you were alone?" Victoria didn't look up from her laptop. "I wasn't alone the whole time. I stepped out for 12 minutes to take a phone call." "In the conference room next door?" "Yes." "Was the call scheduled?" Victoria's fingers stopped moving. "What?" "The phone call. Was it on your calendar, or did it come out of nowhere?" Silence. Marcus watched her face, watched the realization dawn. "It wasn't scheduled," she said slowly. "My assistant said it was urgent. A call from the bank about a wire transfer issue." "Did you verify it was actually the bank?" Victoria's jaw tightened. "No." "So someone called you, got you out of the suite, and in the 12 minutes you were gone, they slipped in, did whatever they needed to do, and slipped out." "They needed me out of the room." Victoria's voice was quiet. "But they also needed a witness, someone to find me when I came back." "That's where I came in." "That's where you came in." Victoria looked at him. "The question is, what were they doing in those 12 minutes? What did they touch? What did they take?" Marcus thought about it. "The scratch on your floor, near the safe. The safe was still locked when I checked. Nothing missing." Maybe they weren't trying to take something. Maybe they were trying to leave something. Victoria's eyes widened. She was on her feet before Marcus could say another word, moving toward the door with a speed that caught him off guard. "Where are you going?" "The suite. I need to check the safe again." "Wait." But she was already gone. They found it 30 minutes later, A small device, no bigger than a thumbnail, hidden in the lining of the safe's door. A listening device, dormant until activated. Victoria held it in her palm, staring at it like it was a living thing. "They've been listening," she said. "Every conversation I've had in this room, every phone call, every meeting." "For how long?" The scratch on the floor was fresh, so this was placed the same day you walked in. Victoria's hand closed around the device. "They weren't trying to kill me, not yet. They wanted information first." "Information about what?" Victoria didn't answer, but something in her face changed, a flicker of fear that she quickly suppressed. "There's something you're not telling me," Marcus said. "There's a lot I'm not telling you." "That's going to be a problem if you want my help." Victoria met his eyes. For a long moment they just looked at each other. Two people who had been thrown together by circumstance, trying to figure out how much trust was possible. "Tomorrow," she said finally. "I'll tell you tomorrow." "Why not now?" "Because I need to make sure it's safe first." She looked down at the device in her hand. "And because I'm not sure I can say it out loud yet." Tomorrow came, and with it, Victoria's secret. They met in her office at 8 a.m. before the rest of the staff arrived. Victoria had dark circles under her eyes again. She'd been up all night, Marcus could tell by the way she held her coffee cup, both hands wrapped around it like a lifeline. "Close the door," she said. He closed it. "What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room." "Okay." Victoria took a breath. 2 years ago, I was at an industry conference in Chicago, a networking event. I knew most of the people there, CEOs, investors, the usual crowd. She paused. Her grip on the coffee cup tightened. There was a man, someone I'd worked with before, someone I trusted. We were talking about a potential partnership. He suggested we continue the conversation somewhere more private. Marcus said nothing. He already knew where this was going. I went with him to a meeting room, just to talk. That's what I told myself. Victoria's voice was flat, controlled, like she was reading from a script. The door locked behind us. He said it was automatic, security feature. She stopped. "You don't have to tell me," Marcus said quietly. "Yes, I do. Because whoever is after me now, they know. They know what happened in that room. They know what he did." Victoria's eyes finally met his. "And they're using it against me." Who was he? Richard Kane, CEO of Kane Hospitality, one of the biggest hotel chains on the East Coast. Victoria's jaw tightened. He didn't succeed. Not completely. But he succeeded enough. Marcus felt cold anger rising in his chest. "Did you report it? To whom? The police, who would drag me through months of questioning while my company's stock tanked, the press, who would turn my trauma into a headline." Victoria laughed bitterly. "I'm a woman in a man's industry, Mr. Johnson. I report something like that, and suddenly I'm the liability. Suddenly I'm the risk." "So you stayed quiet." "I stayed quiet, and I hired better security, and I told myself it was over." Victoria set down her coffee cup. Her hands were shaking. "But it wasn't over. Because 3 weeks ago I started receiving messages. Anonymous. Untraceable. Someone knows what happened in that room, and they're threatening to go public unless I sell my company." Marcus understood now. The vulnerability, the paranoia, the way she'd looked at him in that doorway, not with fear of what he might do, but fear of what had already been done. "The break-in wasn't about killing you," he said. "It was about proving they could get to you. Proving you're not safe. They want me scared. They want me desperate. They want me to sell Monarch Hotels before the story breaks and destroys everything I've built." Victoria's voice cracked. "And the worst part? It's working." Marcus leaned forward. "Who knows about the messages?" "No one. Just you." "Your security team?" "No." "Your lawyers?" "No." Victoria met his eyes. "You're the first person I've told. Because you're the only person I'm sure they haven't gotten to." The weight of that trust settled on Marcus's shoulders. He felt it like a physical thing, heavy, terrifying, impossible to ignore. What do you want me to do? Victoria handed him a flash drive. Everything I have on Richard Kane, his business dealings, his connections, the messages I've received. I need you to find out who's behind this, because if I can prove he's the one pulling the strings, I can destroy him before he destroys me. Marcus took the drive. And if it's not him, then we find out who it really is. Victoria's eyes hardened. And we destroy them instead. The investigation consumed the next 2 weeks. Marcus worked double shifts, splitting his time between his regular maintenance duties and the shadow work Victoria had assigned him. He reviewed security footage until his eyes burned. He traced digital footprints through the hotel's network. He compiled lists of everyone who'd had access to the presidential wing in the past 6 months. The list was longer than expected. 47 people, he told Victoria during one of their midnight sessions. Executives, maintenance staff, security personnel. Any one of them could have planted that device. Can you narrow it down? Working on it. Marcus rubbed his eyes. Whoever did this was careful. No digital traces. No camera footage. The only mistake they made was the scratch on your floor. And choosing you as their patsy. Yeah. Marcus looked at her. That too. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Why did you stay? What? When I told you about Chicago, about Kane, you could have walked away, could have decided this was too dangerous, too complicated. She tilted her head. Why did you stay? Marcus thought about the question. About Zoe. About the text message he'd received that first night. About the feeling of being used as a pawn by people who saw him as disposable. Because you trusted me, he said finally. No one's done that in a long time. Victoria's expression softened. Just for a moment. Then the armor came back. Don't make me regret it. I won't. 3 days later, everything changed. It started with a phone call. Marcus's mother, frantic, her voice crackling through the speaker. She's sick. The school called. Fever of 103. Marcus was in the middle of reviewing access logs. He dropped everything. I'm coming. They need someone to pick her up now. I'm still 20 minutes away. I'll be there in 10. He ran. Zoe was sitting in the nurse's office, her face flushed, her eyes glassy. She looked up when Marcus burst through the door. Daddy. I'm here, baby girl. I'm here. He scooped her up, held her against his chest. She was burning up her little body, radiating heat like a furnace. My tummy hurts. I know. We're going to get you home. He signed her out and carried her to the car. His hands were shaking. His mind was racing. Fever. 103. How long had she been sick? Why hadn't he noticed this morning? He was so focused on Zoe that he didn't notice the black sedan parked across the street. He didn't notice the man in the driver's seat watching him through tinted windows. He didn't notice anything except his daughter. The doctor said it was a virus. Common. Treatable. Nothing to worry about. But Marcus worried anyway. He stayed home for 2 days watching Zoe sleep, checking her temperature every hour, unable to shake the feeling that he'd failed her somehow. That he'd been so focused on Victoria's problems that he'd forgotten his own daughter was vulnerable too. On the second night, his phone buzzed. Victoria. How is she? Marcus stared at the message for a long moment. He hadn't told Victoria about Zoe's illness. Hadn't told anyone at Monarch Hotels. How did you know he typed back? I have security cameras in the parking garage. Saw you running. Asked your supervisor. A pause. Then another message. I'm sorry. Take all the time you need. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. He'd expected pressure, demands. Billionaires didn't wait for maintenance workers. But Victoria was waiting. Thank you, he typed. She's lucky to have you, Victoria replied. And then after a long pause, bring her to the hotel when she's better. I'd like to meet her. Zoe recovered in 3 days. On the 4th day, Marcus took her to work. Is this where you fix things? She asked, staring up at the gleaming facade of Monarch Hotels. This is where I fix things. It's really big. Yeah. Marcus squeezed her hand. It is. The security guard at the front desk did a double take when he saw them. Mr. Johnson, is that? My daughter, Miss Ashford said she could visit. The guard hesitated, then nodded. I'll let her know you're here. They took the elevator to the presidential wing. Zoe pressed her face against the glass, watching the floors tick by. Are we going to the top? Almost. Is it scary up there? Marcus thought about the past 3 weeks. The conspiracy, the threats, the woman with armor in her eyes and fear underneath. Sometimes, he admitted, but that's why I'm here, to make it less scary. The elevator doors opened. Victoria was waiting in the hallway. She was wearing a black dress today, simpler than her usual corporate armor, almost casual. Her hair was down, falling around her shoulders in soft waves. She looked younger, softer, almost human. Zoe tugged on Marcus's hand. Daddy, who's that? That's Miss Ashford. She's the one who said you could visit. Zoe studied Victoria with the unfiltered curiosity of a 6-year-old. You have pretty hair. Victoria's lips twitched. Thank you. You have pretty eyes. Daddy says I have Mommy's eyes. Something flickered across Victoria's face. Pain, maybe. Recognition. Your daddy's right, she said quietly. She knelt down until she was eye level with Zoe. I heard you were sick. Are you feeling better? My tummy still hurts a little, but Daddy made me soup and read me stories. That sounds nice. Victoria glanced up at Marcus, then back at Zoe. I heard you like to draw. I draw castles, and dragons, and sometimes unicorns. I have a conference room down the hall with a whiteboard that covers an entire wall. Would you like to draw on it while your dad works? Zoe's eyes went wide. A whole wall? The whole thing? Zoe looked at Marcus. Her face lit up with excitement. Can I, Daddy? Can I? Marcus felt his throat tighten. He nodded. Victoria stood and offered Zoe her hand. Zoe took it without hesitation. As they walked down the hallway together, the billionaire and the 6-year-old hand in hand, Marcus watched them go. And he realized something had changed. Not just in Victoria, in him. An hour later, Marcus went to collect Zoe from the conference room. He stopped in the doorway. Victoria was standing at the whiteboard, studying an elaborate drawing that covered nearly half the wall. Towers and dragons, and a princess with yellow hair. Zoe was explaining each element with the seriousness of an artist presenting her masterpiece. This is the main castle, Zoe said. And this is where the princess lives, and this is the guard who keeps everyone safe. The guard? Victoria pointed at a stick figure near the castle gate. Who's that? That's someone who protects the princess, like Daddy protects me. Victoria's expression changed. Something cracked open behind her eyes. Does the princess have friends? She asked softly. Not yet. Zoe frowned at her drawing. She's been alone for a long time, but I think she's going to find some soon. Victoria didn't respond. She just stood there staring at the drawing, her hand pressed flat against the whiteboard, like she was trying to reach through it. Marcus cleared his throat. Both of them turned. Daddy? Zoe ran to him, throwing her arms around his waist. Did you see my castle? Miss Victoria said it's the best one she's ever seen. It's beautiful, sweetheart. Marcus looked at Victoria. Thank you. For this. Victoria's composure was back in place, but something was different. The armor had cracks in it now. Cracks that hadn't been there before. She's a good kid, Victoria said quietly. You're lucky. I know. They stood there for a moment, the three of them in a conference room that cost more than Marcus's apartment, and for the first time in weeks, the fear in Victoria's eyes was gone. That night, the power went out. Marcus was running diagnostics on the backup generators when the lights flickered once, twice, and died. Emergency strips along the baseboards glowed red, then went dark. The silence was absolute. His phone buzzed. A text from the security office. Building-wide outage. Backup generators failed. Cause unknown. Marcus's blood went cold. This wasn't an accident. He grabbed his flashlight and ran. Victoria wasn't in her office. She wasn't in the conference room. She wasn't anywhere Marcus expected her to be. He found her in a supply closet on the 47th floor. The door's electronic lock had engaged when the power failed, trapping her inside. Marcus could hear her through the heavy wood, not screaming, not calling for help. Just breathing. Fast, shallow breaths that spoke of barely contained terror. "Victoria!" He pounded on the door. "It's Marcus. Can you hear me?" No response, just that rapid breathing getting faster. "I'm going to get you out. Hold on." He found the manual override panel and pried it open. His hands were shaking. The flashlight kept slipping, but he found the emergency release lever and pulled. The lock disengaged. He pushed open the door. Victoria was in the corner, pressed against the wall, her knees drawn to her chest. Her eyes were squeezed shut. Her whole body was trembling. Marcus understood immediately. The darkness, the locked door, the loss of control. Every trigger her trauma had installed was firing at once. He approached slowly, carefully, the way you'd approach someone standing on the edge of a cliff. "Victoria, it's me. It's Marcus. You're safe." Her eyes opened. But they weren't seeing him. They were seeing something else, some other room, some other darkness, some other man who hadn't meant her well. "I can't." Her voice was a thread. "I can't breathe. I can't." Marcus knelt in front of her. Slowly giving her time to pull away, he placed his hands on her shoulders. The contact seemed to anchor her, draw her back from wherever her mind had gone. "Look at me," he said quietly. "Just look at me. You're in Monarch Hotels. You're on the 47th floor. The power's out, but that's all. Just a blackout. Nothing else." Victoria's eyes focused on his face. Her breathing began to slow. "That's it. In and out. I've got you." "I couldn't get out." Her voice broke. "The door locked and I couldn't get out, and I was back there. I was back in that room with him." "You're not there. You're here. With me." Marcus's hands tightened on her shoulders. "I'm not going to let anything happen to you. Do you understand?" Victoria stared at him. Her breathing was still ragged, but the panic was receding. The present was slowly replacing the past. "You came," she whispered. "Of course I came." "You didn't have to." "Yeah." Marcus met her eyes. "I did." They stayed like that for a long time. In the dark, in the silence, in the aftermath of a fear that had been building for 2 years. When Victoria finally spoke again, her voice was steadier. "I'm not afraid of you." Marcus blinked. "What? I just realized it." Victoria's eyes were wide, searching his face like she was seeing him for the first time. "You're the first man I've been alone with in the dark since Chicago, and I'm not afraid." Marcus didn't know what to say, so he said nothing. He just held on. And in the darkness of that supply closet, something shifted between them. Not romance. Not yet. But something. The crack in the armor had become a doorway, and Marcus Johnson had walked through it. The power came back on at 3:47 a.m. Marcus had stayed with Victoria through the night. They'd moved from the supply closet to her office where the emergency generators finally kicked in and bathed the room in pale fluorescent light. Neither of them had slept. Victoria sat behind her desk, a cup of cold coffee in her hands. Marcus sat across from her, watching her face, watching the way she stared at nothing. "I should thank you," she said finally. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." Victoria's eyes met his. "What you did tonight, no one's ever done that for me before." Opened a door. Stayed. Her voice cracked slightly. Most people, when they see me like that, they don't know what to do. They freeze. They panic. They call security and let someone else handle it. She paused. You stayed. Marcus leaned forward. Can I ask you something? Depends on what it is. The blackout. It wasn't an accident, was it? Victoria's jaw tightened. No. Security found evidence of tampering in the main electrical grid. Someone cut the power deliberately. To trap you. To test me. Victoria set down her coffee cup. They wanted to see how I'd react, whether I'd break. She laughed bitterly. And I almost did. But you didn't. Because you were there. Victoria's eyes held his. If you hadn't found me when you did, I did find you. That's what matters. Silence stretched between them. The kind of silence that holds weight, that carries meaning beyond words. The blackout changes things, Victoria said finally. Whoever is behind this, they're escalating. First the break-in, then the listening device, now this. She stood and walked to the window. They're not just gathering information anymore. They're sending a message. What message? That they can get to me whenever they want. That I'm not safe anywhere. Victoria's voice hardened. And that if I don't do what they want, things are going to get worse. Marcus stood too. What do you want to do? Victoria turned to face him. Her expression was different now. Not afraid, not vulnerable. Something fiercer. I want to fight back. The next morning, Marcus received a visitor. He was reviewing security footage in the presidential wing's monitoring station when the door opened behind him. He turned expecting Victoria or one of her assistants. Instead, he found himself face to face with a man he'd never seen before. Tall, gray hair, expensive suit. The kind of confidence that came from decades of getting whatever he wanted. Mr. Johnson. The man smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. I've heard a lot about you. Marcus's hand moved instinctively toward his phone. Who are you? A friend. The man stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. Or at least I could be, depending on how this conversation goes. I don't know you. No, but I know you. The man pulled out a chair and sat down, crossing his legs like he owned the place. Marcus Johnson, 42 years old, single father, daughter named Zoe, wife deceased car accident 3 years ago. My condolences. Marcus felt cold. How do you know that? I know a lot of things, Mr. Johnson. It's my job to know things. The man leaned forward. For instance, I know you've been spending a lot of time with Victoria Ashford lately. Late nights, private meetings. Some might call it inappropriate. There's nothing inappropriate about it. Know a maintenance worker and a billionaire alone together, night after night. The man's smile widened. I'm sure the tabloids would love that story. Marcus's hands curled into fists. What do you want? Straight to the point. I like that. The man reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph. He slid it across the table. Marcus looked down. His blood turned to ice. The photograph showed him and Victoria in the supply closet. His hands on her shoulders, her face pressed against his chest. The darkness around them, the flashlight beam cutting through the shadows. It looked intimate. It looked compromising. It looked like exactly what it wasn't. Where did you get this? That doesn't matter. What matters is what I'm going to do with it. The man stood. You see, Mr. Johnson, Victoria Ashford has something I want, and she's been very resistant to my offers, but I think this photograph might change her mind. This is blackmail. This is business. The man's voice went cold. I'm going to give you a choice. You can walk away from this, from her, from this hotel, from everything. Take your daughter and disappear. I'll make sure you're compensated for your trouble. And if I don't, then this photograph goes to every board member, every shareholder, every tabloid in the country. The man leaned close. And your life, Mr. Johnson, and your daughter's life becomes very, very complicated." Marcus stared at the photograph, at the image of him holding Victoria in the dark. "Who are you?" he asked again. The man smiled. "My name is Richard Kane, and I'm the man who's going to destroy Victoria Ashford. The only question is whether you're going to help me or go down with her." Marcus didn't tell Victoria about the visit. Not right away. He spent the next 24 hours wrestling with Kane's offer. The smart thing to do was take the money and run. Protect Zoe. Stay invisible. Let the billionaires fight their own battles. But every time he thought about walking away, he remembered Victoria's face in that supply closet. The terror in her eyes. The way she'd clung to him like he was the only solid thing in a world that was crumbling around her. And he remembered Zoe's drawing. The guard who protected the princess. He couldn't walk away. He wouldn't. "Marcus." Victoria's voice cut through his thoughts. He looked up from the security console to find her standing in the doorway, her face pale. "What's wrong?" "The board meeting. It's been moved up to tomorrow morning." "Moved up? Why?" "I don't know." Victoria's jaw tightened. "But I have a feeling we're about to find out." The board meeting started at 9 a.m. sharp. Marcus wasn't supposed to be there. He was maintenance staff, invisible, forgettable, irrelevant to the men and women who controlled billions of dollars. But Victoria had asked him to wait in the hallway, just in case. So he waited. Through the polished door he could hear muffled voices, the drone of the quarterly report, the rustle of papers being shuffled, and then silence. Complete, absolute silence. Followed by a single voice loud enough to carry through the door. "I think we need to discuss this before we proceed." Marcus's stomach dropped. He knew that voice. Richard Kane. Inside the boardroom, Victoria sat at the head of the table, her face frozen. Every board member held a copy of the photograph. The same photograph Kane had shown Marcus. The same grainy image of two figures in the dark, their bodies close their embrace unmistakable. Harrison Wells, the vice chairman, held up his copy with an expression of theatrical concern. "This appears to show our CEO in a compromising position with a member of the maintenance staff." He paused for effect. "I'm sure there's an explanation, but given recent concerns about company image." "Where did you get this?" Victoria's voice was ice. "It was sent anonymously to several board members this morning." Wells glanced at Kane, who sat 3 seats down, his face carefully neutral. "We felt it was important to address it directly." Victoria looked at the photograph again. The angle was perfect, calculated to make an innocent moment look like something sordid. You couldn't see her face, couldn't see that she'd been in the grip of a panic attack moments before. You could only see Marcus holding her leaning into him, the darkness surrounding them both. "Perhaps you'd like to explain the context," Wells suggested. Victoria felt the eyes of every board member on her. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked hungry. A few Kane's allies, she was certain, looked triumphant. She had 2 choices. She could deflect, minimize, spin some story about professional boundaries and unfortunate optics. Sacrifice Marcus to protect herself and hope the board moved on. Or she could tell the truth. All of it. The trauma she'd hidden for years. The vulnerability she'd never let anyone see. The reason a man's arms around her in the dark was not a scandal, but a lifeline. Victoria thought of Marcus, the way he'd knelt in front of her during the blackout, the steadiness in his voice, the way he'd treated her not like a broken thing, but like a person who was struggling and deserved help. He hadn't asked for any of this. He'd just been doing his job, being a decent human being, and now someone wanted to use that decency as a weapon against them both. Victoria stood. "I'll explain," she said quietly, "but not to protect myself, to protect someone who doesn't deserve to be dragged into whatever game is being played here." She took a breath, and then she told them everything. The words came slowly at first, then faster. She told them about the conference in Chicago, about the networking event, and the man she'd trusted. About the meeting room and the door that locked behind her. She told them about the things Richard Kane had done that night, the things he'd said, the way he'd looked at her when she'd tried to leave. She told them about the months of therapy afterward, the nightmares, the hypervigilance, the way closed doors and sudden noises could send her spiraling into panic. She told them about the blackout at Monarch Hotels, about being trapped in the supply closet, about the terror that had seized her body before her mind could catch up. And she told them about Marcus Johnson. "The man in this photograph saved me from a panic attack," Victoria said, her voice steady as steel. "He did nothing inappropriate. He showed compassion to someone in crisis. He stayed with me through the night because I asked him to, because I was afraid to be alone." She looked around the table. "If this board decides to punish him for that, you'll have my resignation within the hour." Silence. Harrison Wells had gone slightly pale. Several board members were staring at their hands, unable to meet her eyes. Richard Kane's face was unreadable. Furthermore, Victoria continued, her voice hardening. "I want to know who took this photograph and who distributed it, because whoever did so has been monitoring my movements without authorization, and that's a security breach I intend to prosecute to the fullest extent of the law." She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a folder. And while we're on the subject of unauthorized activities, she slid the folder across the table toward Kane. "I'd like the board to review this." Kane's composure cracked. Just slightly. Just for a moment. "What is that?" "Financial records, showing a series of unauthorized wire transfers from Monarch Hotel's operating accounts to a shell company in the Caymans." Victoria's eyes never left Kane's face. "A shell company that, according to my investigators, is wholly owned by Kane Hospitality." The room erupted. Board members shouted questions. Papers scattered. Harrison Wells was on his feet demanding explanations. But Victoria kept her eyes on Kane. "You've been embezzling from this company for 18 months, she said quietly. "And when I started getting close to the truth, you decided to destroy me before I could destroy you." Kane's face twisted. "You have no proof." "I have bank records. I have witness statements from your own finance department. And I have—" Victoria pulled out her phone and pressed play on a recording. "This." Kane's voice filled the room. "You can walk away from this, from her, from this hotel, from everything. Take your daughter and disappear. I'll make sure you're compensated for your trouble. And if I don't, then this photograph goes to every board member, every shareholder, every tabloid in the country." The recording ended. Victoria looked at the board. "That was Richard Kane attempting to bribe my head of security technology yesterday afternoon. Mr. Johnson recorded the conversation and brought it directly to me." Kane was on his feet now, his face red with fury. "This is entrapment. This is evidence." Victoria cut him off. "Evidence of embezzlement, bribery, and blackmail. And unless I'm mistaken, the police are waiting outside to discuss it with you." As if on cue, the boardroom door opened. 2 officers stepped inside. "Richard Kane," one of them said, "you're under arrest for fraud, extortion, and criminal conspiracy." Kane looked around the room, searching for allies, finding none. "This isn't over," he snarled at Victoria. "You think you've won. You have no idea what—" "Take him out," Victoria said quietly. The officers did. The boardroom was silent for a long moment after Kane's departure. Then Harrison Wells cleared his throat. "Miss Ashford, I believe I speak for the entire board when I say we owe you an apology." Victoria didn't respond. "The photograph, the accusations, we should have verified the source before bringing this to the table." Wells looked genuinely ashamed. "It was irresponsible, and I'm sorry." "Apologies are nice," Victoria said. "Actions are better. What would you have us do?" Victoria stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. First, I want a formal apology issued to Marcus Johnson for the damage this photograph has caused to his reputation. Done. Second, I'm promoting him to Director of Executive Security, effective immediately. Wells blinked. That's a significant position. Are you certain? More certain than I've been about anything in years. Victoria turned to face the board. That man risked his job, his reputation, and his family's safety to help me expose Richard Kane. He could have taken the bribe and walked away. He didn't. She paused. I've spent 15 years building this company. In all that time, I can count on one hand the number of people I trust completely. Marcus Johnson is one of them. Wells nodded slowly. Very well. Any objections? Silence. Motion carries. Is there anything else? Victoria looked around the table, at the men and women who had almost let a predator destroy her, who had sat in judgment without knowing the truth. Yes, she said. There is. She walked back to her seat and picked up the photograph. This image was taken by someone inside this building, someone with access to areas they shouldn't have access to, someone who has been watching me for weeks, maybe months. She held up the photograph. Richard Kane may have been the mastermind, but he had help, someone on the inside. And I intend to find out who. She set the photograph down. This meeting is adjourned. Marcus was still waiting in the hallway when the board members filed out. He watched their faces. Some avoided his eyes. Others nodded awkwardly as they passed. A few Kane's former allies looked like they wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. Victoria was the last to emerge. She walked toward him, her heels clicking against the marble, her expression unreadable. Did they fire you? He asked. No. Did they fire me? Victoria's lips twitched, almost a smile. No, she said. They promoted you. Marcus blinked. What? Director of Executive Security, effective immediately. Victoria stopped in front of him. I hope that's acceptable. Marcus stared at her. You told them. About Chicago. About what he did to you. I told them everything. Why? Because they were going to crucify you for being kind to me. Victoria's voice softened. And I refused to let that happen. Marcus didn't know what to say. So he said the only thing that came to mind. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Kane is gone, but whoever planted that camera is still out there. Victoria's eyes hardened. This isn't over. I know. Good. Victoria started walking toward her office. Then let's get to work. That evening, after the chaos had settled, Marcus found Victoria standing in the hallway outside Suite 88. The same door where everything had started. She wasn't looking at the door. She was staring at the wall opposite, where a small painting hung a landscape mountains shrouded in mist. My mother bought this painting, Victoria said without turning around. When I was 12, she said the mountains reminded her that some things are bigger than us, that our problems, no matter how overwhelming they seem, are just weather patterns passing over something ancient and unmovable. Marcus moved to stand beside her. Smart woman. She was. Victoria's voice caught. She died when I was 23. Car accident. Just like your wife. Marcus felt something twist in his chest. I didn't know. How could you? I don't talk about it. Victoria finally turned to face him. But today in that boardroom, I talked about a lot of things I never talk about. Things I've spent years hiding. And you know what? What? It didn't destroy me. Victoria's eyes were bright, almost fierce. I thought it would. I thought if I ever told anyone the truth about what happened, I'd fall apart. But I didn't. I stood there and I told the truth, and I'm still standing. You're stronger than you think. Maybe? Victoria looked back at the painting. Or maybe I'm just tired of hiding. They stood in silence for a long moment. I should go, Marcus said finally. Zoe's waiting. Right. Victoria nodded. The new job starts tomorrow, 8 a.m. Don't be late. Marcus smiled. Wouldn't dream of it. He turned to leave. Marcus? He stopped. That night in the supply closet, when you held me. Victoria's voice was quiet. I wasn't afraid of you. I need you to understand what that means. Marcus looked at her. At the woman who had been hurt, who had been hunted, who had fought back and won. I think I do, he said. Victoria nodded. Something passed between them, unspoken, unfinished, but real. Good night, Marcus. Good night, Victoria. He walked toward the elevator, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. Behind him, Victoria stood alone, looking at the painting of mountains shrouded in mist. For the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. Marcus got home at 9:17 p.m. Zoe was asleep on the couch, her grandmother dozing in the armchair beside her. The TV was playing some cartoon on mute. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching his daughter breathe. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. I forgot to say you did good today. Really good. Marcus smiled. So did you, he typed back. A pause. Then, we make a good team. Marcus looked at his sleeping daughter, at the apartment that was too small with the ceiling that still leaked when it rained, at the life he'd built from the wreckage of grief and loss. He thought about Victoria, about the walls she'd spent years constructing and the cracks that were finally letting light through. He thought about what it meant to protect someone, not because you had to, not because you were paid to, but because you wanted to, because they mattered. Yeah, he typed. We do. He put the phone away, lifted Zoe gently from the couch, and carried her to bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, new battles to fight. But tonight, for the first time in a long time, Marcus Johnson felt something he hadn't felt since his wife died. Hope. 2 weeks passed after Richard Kane's arrest. The news coverage was relentless. Every tabloid, every business channel, every gossip blog had a version of the story. Most of them got it wrong. Some painted Victoria as a victim. Others painted her as a ruthless CEO who had destroyed a rival. A few, the worst ones, speculated about her relationship with Marcus, despite the official statement the company had released. Victoria ignored all of it. She had work to do. The insider, she said, spreading a stack of personnel files across her desk. Whoever helped Kane plant that camera is still here, still watching, still waiting. Marcus stood on the other side of the desk, arms crossed. We've reviewed every access log from the past 6 months. Nothing unusual. Then we're missing something. Or they're better at hiding than we thought. Victoria picked up one of the files. Daniel Mercer, the dead man whose credentials were used to modify the security system. Someone resurrected his access codes. Someone who knew he was dead and knew his codes were still active in the backup database. That narrows it down to IT and HR. And anyone who had access to employee termination records. Victoria dropped the file, which is still too many people. Marcus moved to the window, thinking, what if we're approaching this wrong? What do you mean? We keep looking for who had access to the systems, but maybe we should be looking at who had access to you. He turned to face her. Whoever planted that camera knew your schedule, knew when you'd be alone in that suite, knew exactly when to cut the power during the blackout. Victoria's jaw tightened. Someone close to me. Someone who sees your calendar, your movements, your private meetings. The implication hung in the air. Victoria looked down at her desk, at the stack of files, at the names of people she saw every day. My assistant, she said quietly. Elena? She's been with me for 4 years. I'm not saying it's her. I'm saying we need to look at everyone with that level of access. Victoria nodded slowly. Pull the access logs for my personal calendar. Every login, every modification, going back 6 months. That's going to take time. Then we'd better get started. Guys, the answer came 3 days later. Marcus found it buried in a routine backup file, a login timestamp that didn't match any authorized user. Someone had accessed Victoria's calendar from an external IP address at 2:47 a.m., 3 days before the supply closet incident. He traced the IP to a coffee shop 4 blocks from Monarch Hotels. And then, he traced the credit card that had been used at that coffee shop at 2:43 a.m. The name on the card made his stomach drop. Gerald Patterson. Gerald. Victoria stared at the evidence Marcus had compiled. That's impossible. He's a supervisor in the maintenance department. He doesn't have access to executive systems. He didn't need access to executive systems. He just needed to know someone who did. Marcus pulled up another file. 3 months ago, Gerald Patterson started dating a woman named Sarah Chen. Sarah Chen works in IT. Specifically, she works on the backup database team. Victoria's face went pale. She would have access to deactivated employee credentials. She would have access to everything. Marcus's voice was grim. Gerald was the one who sent me to your suite that first day. He was nervous, sweating. He told me not to mention his name if anyone asked. He was the inside man. He was Kane's inside man. Marcus set down the file. The question is, did he know what he was helping with, or was he just following orders? Victoria stood and walked to the window. Her reflection stared back at her hollow-eyed and tired. "Bring him in," she said. "I want to talk to him myself." Gerald Patterson looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. He sat in Victoria's office, his hands trembling, his face gray with fear. 2 security guards stood by the door. Marcus stood behind Victoria's desk, watching. Victoria sat across from Gerald, her expression unreadable. "Do you know why you're here?" she asked. Gerald's eyes darted to Marcus, then back to Victoria. I didn't know what they were planning. I swear to God I didn't know." "What did you think was happening?" "They told me it was a security test, that's all. They said they needed someone to send a maintenance worker to the presidential wing at a specific time, to test the response protocols." Gerald's voice cracked. "I didn't know about the cameras. I didn't know about any of it." "Who told you?" Gerald hesitated. "Gerald." Victoria's voice was ice. "Who told you?" "Sarah." The name came out like a confession. "Sarah Chen. We've been dating for 3 months. She said she was working on a special project, something confidential. She needed my help." "And you didn't ask questions?" "I trusted her." Gerald's eyes filled with tears. "I loved her. I thought she loved me too." Marcus felt a flicker of something unexpected. Pity. Gerald Patterson wasn't a mastermind. He was a lonely man who had been used by people smarter and crueler than him. "Where is Sarah Chen now?" Victoria asked. "I don't know. She stopped returning my calls after Mr. Kane was arrested. Her apartment is empty. Her phone is disconnected." Gerald looked up desperate. "I didn't know, Miss Ashford. I swear on my children's lives I didn't know what they were really doing." Victoria studied him for a long moment. "Do you know what they were really doing, Gerald?" "No." "They were trying to destroy me. They were going to use that photograph of Marcus and me to force me to sell my company. And if that didn't work..." Victoria paused. "They had other plans." Gerald's face went white. "Other plans. The scratch on my floor, the camera in my safe, the blackout that trapped me in a supply closet." Victoria's voice was steady, but Marcus could hear the anger beneath it. "They weren't just gathering information, Gerald. They were building a case, documenting my movements, learning my vulnerabilities. And when they were ready, they were going to use all of it to take everything from me." Gerald was shaking now. "I didn't know. I believe you." Victoria stood. "But your ignorance doesn't change what happened. It doesn't change the fear I felt in that supply closet. It doesn't change the damage that photograph caused to Marcus's reputation. It doesn't change any of it. What are you going to do to me?" Victoria looked at Marcus. Something passed between them, a silent conversation. "You're fired," Victoria said finally. "Effective immediately. Security will escort you out of the building." "That's it." Gerald looked almost hopeful. "You're not going to press charges. The police will decide that. I've given them everything I have on Sarah Chen. If they need your testimony, they'll find you." Victoria walked to the door and opened it. "But Gerald, if I ever see you near this building again, if I ever hear that you've spoken about me or Marcus or anything that happened here, I will destroy you. Do you understand?" Gerald nodded frantically. "Good. Get out." The guards led him away. After Gerald was gone, Marcus and Victoria stood in silence for a long moment. "You let him go," Marcus said finally. "He didn't know what he was doing. He helped them get to you. He was used, just like you were." Victoria turned to face him. "The difference is you chose to fight back. He chose to be blind." She paused. "I don't have the energy to punish everyone who is too weak to see the truth." Marcus nodded slowly. "What about Sarah Chen?" "The police are looking for her. She's probably already out of the country." Victoria walked back to her desk and sat down heavily. Kane planned this for months, maybe years. Sarah was just another piece on the board. And now? Now we wait. Victoria rubbed her eyes. Kane is in custody. His assets are frozen. His company is under investigation. Whatever he was planning, it's over. Is it? Victoria looked at him. What do you mean? I mean, men like Kane don't give up. Even from a jail cell, he's got resources, connections, people who owe him favors. Marcus moved closer. I don't think this is over. I think it's just beginning. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. You might be right, she said finally. But for now, I'm tired. I've been fighting for weeks. I just want one night where I don't have to look over my shoulder. Marcus hesitated. Then he said something he hadn't planned to say. Have dinner with me. Victoria blinked. What? Dinner. Food. Eating. The thing normal people do when they're not hunting corporate criminals. Marcus felt heat rise to his cheeks. I know a place. Nothing fancy. But the food is good, and nobody there gives a damn about who you are or how much money you have. Victoria stared at him. Are you asking me on a date? I'm asking you to have a meal with a friend. Marcus met her eyes. Unless you'd rather sit here alone staring at personnel files and waiting for the next crisis. A long pause. Then slowly, Victoria smiled. What time? Cha. The restaurant was called Mama Rosa's. It was a hole-in-the-wall Italian place in a neighborhood Victoria had never visited. The tables were covered with checkered cloths. The wine came in carafes. The owner, an elderly woman named Rosa, who had known Marcus's mother for 30 years, greeted them at the door with a hug and a stream of rapid Italian. Victoria stood awkwardly unsure what to do. Rosa looked her up and down, then turned to Marcus. This is her, the one you've been talking about. Mama Rosa. She's too skinny. Rosa grabbed Victoria's arm and led her to a corner table. Sit. Eat. I'll bring the special. Victoria looked at Marcus helplessly as Rosa disappeared into the kitchen. Did she just kidnap me? Pretty much. Marcus sat across from her, grinning. Don't worry, the food's worth it. You've been talking about me? She asked why I've been working so many late nights. I may have mentioned there was a woman involved. Victoria felt her cheeks warm. What did you tell her? The truth, that you're my boss, that you're in trouble, that I'm trying to help. That's all. Marcus held her gaze. That's all I've figured out so far. The food was incredible. Fresh pasta, homemade sauce, bread that was still warm from the oven. Victoria ate like she hadn't eaten in weeks because she realized she hadn't. Not really. Not without one eye on her phone, one ear listening for threats. "This is amazing," she said between bites. "How did you find this place?" "My wife brought me here on our first date." Marcus's voice was soft. "She said if a man could appreciate Mama Rosa's cooking, he was worth keeping." Victoria set down her fork. "You don't talk about her much. Your wife." "Keisha." Marcus smiled, but there was sadness in it. "She was everything. Smart, funny, stubborn as hell. She would have liked you." Yeah. She had this thing about women who didn't take crap from anyone. Said the world needed more of them. Marcus looked down at his plate. "She died 3 years ago. Car accident. Drunk driver ran a red light." "I'm sorry." "Me too." Marcus met her eyes. "But you know what I have learned, grief doesn't go away. You just learn to carry it differently. Some days it's heavier than others, but it's always there." Victoria nodded slowly. "I understand that." "I know you do." They sat in silence for a moment. Not uncomfortable, just present. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria said finally. "Anything." "That first day, when you opened my door, when you saw me." She hesitated. "What did you think?" Marcus considered the question. "I thought I was going to lose my job. I thought I was going to lose everything I'd worked for. I thought my daughter was going to grow up without a father." "That's what you were afraid of." "That's what I was terrified of." Marcus leaned forward. "But you know what else I thought." "What?" "I thought, here's a woman who looks like she has everything. Money, power, a building with her name on it. And she's just as scared as I am." Victoria's breath caught. "I didn't see a billionaire that day," Marcus continued. "I saw a person. Someone who was carrying more weight than anyone should have to carry alone. Someone who needed help and didn't know how to ask for it. And you decided to help anyway." "I decided you were worth helping." Marcus's voice was quiet. "I still think that." Victoria didn't respond. She couldn't. There were too many words crowding her throat, too many feelings she didn't have names for. Instead, she reached across the table and took his hand. They sat like that, fingers intertwined, until Mama Rosa appeared with dessert. 2 months later, the trial began. Richard Kane was charged with fraud, extortion, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming. Marcus's recording, the financial documents, the testimony of 3 former Kane hospitality employees who had witnessed his illegal activities firsthand. But Kane had money, and money bought lawyers, good lawyers. The trial dragged on for 6 weeks. Victoria testified on the 4th day. She sat in the witness stand for 3 hours, answering questions about the break-in, the blackout, the photograph. The defense attorney tried to rattle her, tried to make her look unstable, tried to paint her as a vindictive woman out for revenge. She didn't flinch. When they asked about Chicago, about what Kane had done to her 2 years ago, Victoria told the truth. Every word, every detail. Her voice never wavered. Marcus watched from the gallery, his hands clenched into fists. Afterward, in the hallway outside the courtroom, Victoria found him waiting. "How did I do?" she asked. "You were incredible." "I was terrified." "I know." Marcus took her hand. "That's what made it incredible." The verdict came on a Friday afternoon. Guilty on all counts. Richard Kane was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. When the judge announced the sentence, Victoria felt something she hadn't felt in years. Release. The weight she'd been carrying, the fear, the shame, the constant vigilance, it didn't disappear. But it shifted, became lighter, more manageable. She walked out of the courthouse into the afternoon sun, and Marcus was there. "It's over," she said. "It's over." Victoria looked at him, this man who had stumbled into her life by accident and stayed by choice. This man who had seen her at her worst and hadn't looked away. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." You don't have to thank me. Yes, I do, because without you... Victoria's voice broke. Without you, I don't know if I would have made it through this. Marcus stepped closer. You would have. You're the strongest person I've ever met. I don't feel strong. That's okay. He took her hands in his. You don't have to feel strong. You just have to keep going, and you don't have to keep going alone. Victoria looked at their intertwined hands, at the man who had become her partner, her protector, her friend. What happens now? She asked. Now? Marcus smiled. Now we go pick up Zoe from school, and then we go home, and then we figure out the rest. Together. Together. 6 months later, everything had changed. Monarch Hotels was thriving. The scandal had faded from the headlines, replaced by stories of Victoria's expansion into international markets, her innovative sustainability programs, her reputation as a CEO who actually cared about her employees. Marcus was still director of executive security, but his role had evolved into something more. He was Victoria's advisor, her confidant, her partner in ways that went far beyond professional, and Zoe had become a fixture in their lives. She spent afternoons at Monarch Hotels drawing in the conference room while Marcus and Victoria worked. She had her own desk, now a child-sized one that Victoria had ordered specially, and her own collection of colored pencils that filled an entire drawer. Victoria kept every drawing. Miss Victoria, Zoe's voice interrupted a late afternoon meeting. Can you look at my picture? Victoria excused herself from the conference call and walked to Zoe's desk. What did you draw? Zoe held up the paper proudly. It showed 3 figures standing in front of a building, a tall man, a woman with long hair, and a small girl between them holding both their hands. That's Daddy, Zoe said, pointing. And that's you, and that's me. Victoria felt her throat tighten. We're a family, Zoe explained. That's what I want for Christmas. Victoria knelt down until she was eye level with the little girl. Sweetheart, families are complicated. No, they're not. Zoe's voice was matter-of-fact. A family is people who love each other and take care of each other. You take care of Daddy. Daddy takes care of you. And you both take care of me. Victoria looked at the drawing, at the 3 figures holding hands. You're right, she said softly. That is what a family is. Zoe grinned. So we're a family. Victoria pulled the little girl into a hug. Yeah, she whispered. I think we are. That night, after Zoe was asleep, Marcus and Victoria stood on the rooftop terrace of Monarch Hotels. The city glittered below them. The sky was clear. The air was cold, but not uncomfortable. Zoe showed me her drawing, Victoria said. The family one. She thinks we're a family. Marcus was quiet for a moment. What do you think? Victoria turned to face him. I think I spent years building walls around myself. I thought if I kept everyone out, I'd be safe. I thought if I never let anyone close, I'd never get hurt again. And now I realize that keeping everyone out didn't keep me safe. It just kept me alone. Victoria's eyes met his. You didn't tear down my walls, Marcus. You just walked through the door I forgot was there. Marcus stepped closer. Is that a good thing? It's the best thing that's happened to me in years. They stood there close enough to touch the city lights reflecting in their eyes. I'm scared, Victoria admitted. Of what? Of this. Of us. Of letting myself want something I might lose. Marcus took her hands. I'm scared too. I lost someone I loved once. The idea of going through that again. He shook his head. It terrifies me. So what do? We take it slow. We figure it out together. And we trust each other. Marcus squeezed her hands. That's all we can do. Victoria nodded. Together. Together. She leaned forward and rested her forehead against his chest. His arms wrapped around her, holding her close. They stood there for a long time, two people who had found each other in the wreckage of their separate tragedies. Two people who had learned that strength wasn't about never being afraid. It was about being afraid and reaching for someone anyway. The next morning, Marcus found a drawing taped to his office door. 3 figures, a castle, a sun with a smiling face. At the bottom, in Zoe's crooked handwriting, "My family." He took the drawing down carefully, folded it, and slipped it into his wallet next to the one she'd given him months ago. The guard who protects everyone. He thought about Victoria. About the woman who had been broken and was learning to heal. About the walls she'd built and the door he'd walked through. He thought about his daughter. About the way she saw the good in people. About the family she had drawn into existence with crayons and hope. He thought about Keisha. About the life they'd had and the life he was building now. And he realized something. Grief didn't go away, but love didn't either. It just found new shapes, new expressions, new people to hold it. Marcus looked at the drawing one more time. Then he went to find Victoria. They had a future to build. 1 year to the day after Marcus Johnson had opened the wrong door, he stood in the same hallway where everything had started. Suite 88, the presidential wing, the place that had changed both their lives forever. The door was closed. The corridor was empty. And Marcus was holding a small velvet box in his pocket, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. "You look like you're about to pass out." He turned. Victoria was walking toward him, her heels clicking against the marble, a half smile playing on her lips. "I'm fine. You're sweating. It's warm in here. It's 68 degrees. Victoria stopped in front of him, tilting her head. "What are you doing outside my old suite?" Marcus took a breath. "I wanted to come back here, to where it started." "Why?" "Because I've been thinking about that day, about what happened, about everything that came after." He met her eyes. "And I realized something." "What?" "That was the worst day of my life." Marcus paused. "And also the best." Victoria's expression softened. "Marcus, I thought I was going to lose everything. My job, my freedom, my daughter." He stepped closer. "But instead, I found you, and you found me, and somehow, in the middle of all that chaos and fear, we found each other." Victoria was quiet. Her eyes were bright, but she didn't look away. "I know we said we'd take it slow," Marcus continued. "And we have. A whole year of slow. A whole year of figuring out what this is between us. A whole year of learning to trust each other, to lean on each other to build something real." "It has been a year," Victoria agreed. "And I don't want to wait anymore." Marcus reached into his pocket. His fingers closed around the velvet box. "I'm not a rich man, Victoria. I can't give you the things you're used to. I can't buy you hotels or jewelry or anything that costs more than my car." He pulled out the box and opened it. "But I can give you this." Inside was a ring. Simple, elegant, a single diamond on a silver band. "It was my grandmother's," Marcus said. "She gave it to my mother. My mother gave it to me to give to the woman I wanted to spend my life with. I gave it to Keisha the day I asked her to marry me." Victoria's breath caught. "After Keisha died, I thought I'd never give this ring to anyone again. I thought that part of my life was over." Marcus's voice cracked. "But then I met you, and I realized that loving someone new doesn't mean forgetting someone old. It just means your heart is bigger than you thought." He took the ring from the box and held it up. "Victoria Ashford, I know you've been hurt. I know you've been betrayed. I know there are parts of you that are still afraid to let anyone in completely." He met her eyes. But I'm asking you to let me in anyway. I'm asking you to take a chance on us. On this. On a future that neither of us planned, but both of us deserve. Victoria's hand was trembling as she reached out. Will you marry me? For a long moment she didn't answer. Marcus felt his heart stop. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Then Victoria laughed. It wasn't a cruel laugh. It was a release, a sound of pure, unexpected joy. You're asking me to marry you in a hallway, she said. I'm asking you to marry me in the hallway where we met. You're proposing with your dead wife's ring. I'm proposing with a ring that represents the best of who I am and everything I want to give you. Victoria looked at the ring, at the simple diamond, at the silver band worn smooth by decades of love. Yes, she said. Marcus blinked. Yes. Yes. Victoria's smile was brighter than he'd ever seen it. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll take a chance on us. Yes, I'll let you in. She held out her hand. Now put the ring on before I change my mind. Marcus slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. And then he kissed her, right there in the hallway of the presidential wing, outside the door where everything had started. Marcus Johnson kissed Victoria Ashford like they had all the time in the world. Because they did. The wedding was small. Victoria had insisted on that. No media circus, no society spectacle. Just family and close friends gathered in the garden of Monarch Hotels on a sunny afternoon in May. Marcus's mother sat in the front row, tears streaming down her face. Beside her, Zoe fidgeted in her flower girl dress, clutching a basket of rose petals. "When can I throw the flowers?" she whispered loudly. "Soon, sweetheart, very soon." Victoria walked down the aisle alone. She had no father to give her away, no family left to stand beside her. But as she walked toward Marcus, she didn't feel alone. She felt free. Marcus watched her approach his eyes, never leaving her face. She was wearing a simple white dress, no train, no veil, just elegance and grace. Her hair was down, falling around her shoulders the way he loved. She was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. "Hi," she said when she reached him. "Hi. You clean up nice. You too." The officiant cleared his throat. "Shall we begin?" They turned to face each other, hands clasped, hearts open. "We are gathered here today to witness the union of Marcus Johnson and Victoria Ashford. Two people who found each other in unexpected circumstances and chose to build a life together." Marcus squeezed Victoria's hands. Marriage is not just a commitment between two people. It's a promise to weather every storm, to celebrate every joy, to hold each other up when the world tries to tear you down. The officiant smiled. "I understand the couple has written their own vows." Victoria went first. "Marcus, a year ago you opened a door you weren't supposed to open. And instead of running away from the chaos that followed, you stayed. You stayed when everyone else would have left. You stayed when staying was dangerous. You stayed when I gave you every reason to go." Her voice trembled, but she kept going. "I spent years building walls around myself. I thought if I kept everyone out, I'd never get hurt again. But you didn't try to tear down my walls. You just walked through the door I forgot was there. And in doing so, you showed me that strength isn't about never being afraid. It's about being afraid and reaching for someone anyway." She squeezed his hands. "I promise to reach for you, Marcus, every day, for the rest of our lives. I promise to be your partner, your friend, your family. I promise to love Zoe like she's my own. And I promise to never close the door on you no matter how scared I get." Marcus felt tears prickling at his eyes. He blinked them back. "Victoria, I've loved two women in my life. The first taught me what love was. The second taught me that love doesn't end. It just finds new ways to grow." He took a breath. "When I walked into your suite that day, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd lose my job, my freedom, everything I'd worked for. Instead, I found something I didn't know I was looking for. I found a woman who was carrying more weight than anyone should have to carry alone. A woman who had been hurt, who had been betrayed, who had every reason to never trust anyone again. His voice steadied. But you trusted me. You let me in. You let me see the parts of you that you'd hidden from everyone else. And in doing so, you gave me something I thought I'd lost forever, a reason to hope again. He lifted her hands to his lips and kissed them. I promise to protect you, Victoria. Not because you need protecting, you're the strongest person I know, but because you deserve someone who will stand beside you when the world gets hard. I promise to be patient when you're scared. I promise to be honest when it would be easier to lie. I promise to love you with everything I have for as long as I live. The officiant smiled. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. Marcus pulled Victoria into his arms and kissed her deeply. Behind them, Zoe jumped up and threw her entire basket of rose petals into the air. "They're married," she shouted. "Now can we have cake?" The guests laughed. Marcus and Victoria pulled apart, both of them grinning. "Yeah," Marcus said, looking at his new wife. "Now we can have cake." The reception was held in the same garden under a canopy of string lights that glowed as the sun began to set. Marcus danced with his mother first, then with Zoe, then finally with Victoria. They swayed together to a slow song, her head resting on his shoulder, his arms wrapped around her waist. "Mrs. Johnson," he murmured. "Mr. Johnson. How does it feel?" Victoria lifted her head and looked at him. "Like I'm finally home." Marcus smiled. "Yeah, that's exactly how it feels." They danced until the song ended, then walked hand in hand to the edge of the garden where a small bench overlooked the city lights. "Can I tell you something?" Victoria asked. "Anything." "A year ago, I was ready to give up. Not just on the company, on everything." She looked out at the city. Richard Kane had broken something inside me, not just with what he did in Chicago, but with everything that came after. The threats, the surveillance, the constant fear. I felt like I was drowning and no one could see it. Marcus squeezed her hand. "And then you opened that door." Victoria turned to face him. "And I know this sounds crazy, but the moment I saw your face, the terror, the confusion, the absolute shock, I felt something shift inside me. Because you weren't dangerous. You weren't calculating. You were just a man who had stumbled into something he didn't understand. And somehow, that made me feel less alone." "You're not alone," Marcus said. "Not anymore. Not ever again." Victoria leaned into him. "I know. And that's the miracle, isn't it? That two broken people can find each other and somehow become whole together." They sat in silence for a while, watching the city lights flicker. Then Zoe came running up, her dress covered in frosting. "Daddy, Miss Victoria Grandma says it's time to cut the cake." Victoria laughed. "Tell Grandma we're coming." Okay. Zoe ran back toward the party, her flower girl basket bouncing against her leg. Victoria watched her go. "She called me Miss Victoria." She's still getting used to the idea. "I don't mind." Victoria's voice was soft. "I don't want to replace her mother. I just want to be part of her life." "You already are." Marcus stood and offered her his hand. "Come on, Mrs. Johnson. We have a cake to cut." Victoria took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. Together they walked back to the party. Together they cut the cake. Together they danced until midnight. And when the last guest had gone home and Zoe had fallen asleep on Marcus's shoulder, they stood on the rooftop terrace of Monarch Hotels, looking out at the city that had brought them together. "So," Victoria said, "what now?" "Now." Marcus looked at his sleeping daughter, then at his new wife. "Now we go home. We put Zoe to bed. And we start the rest of our lives. That simple. That simple." He smiled. "The hard part's over, Victoria. We fought the battles. We survived the storms. Everything that comes next, it's just living. And we're going to be really good at that." Victoria leaned her head against his shoulder. I love you, Marcus Johnson. I love you too, Victoria Johnson. They stood there for a long time, watching the city lights holding each other close. Three broken hearts slowly healing together. 2 years later, the foundation opened. Victoria had been planning it for months, a non-profit organization dedicated to supporting survivors of assault. Counseling services, legal aid, safe housing, everything she had wished she'd had in the aftermath of Chicago. The headquarters was a converted warehouse on the east side of the city. Victoria had overseen every detail of the renovation herself, the warm colors, the comfortable furniture, the private rooms where survivors could tell their stories without fear. The name was Marcus's idea. They called it the Open Door. Because that's what saved me, Victoria had said when she unveiled the sign. Someone opening a door when I thought all of them were closed. The launch event was packed with donors, activists, and journalists. Victoria gave a speech about her own experience, the assault, the silence, the years of fear and shame. It was the first time she had spoken publicly about what Richard Kane had done to her. Afterward, a young woman approached her. Miss Ashford, Mrs. Johnson, I don't know what to call you. Victoria is fine. The woman was in her early 20s with tired eyes and hands that wouldn't stop shaking. I heard your speech, she said, about what happened to you, about how you survived. Thank you for listening. The woman's voice broke. Something happened to me 6 months ago. I haven't told anyone. I didn't think anyone would believe me. Victoria's heart cracked open. She took the woman's hands in hers. I believe you, she said. And there are people here who can help. Whatever you need, counseling, legal support, just someone to listen, we're here for you. The woman started to cry. Victoria held her while she sobbed right there in the middle of the crowded room. She didn't care who was watching. She didn't care about the donors or the journalists or the carefully planned schedule. She cared about this woman, this survivor, this person who had found the courage to walk through the door. Later, after the event had ended and the guests had gone home, Marcus found Victoria sitting alone in the main counseling room. You okay? Victoria looked up. Her eyes were red, but she was smiling. There was a woman, she said. Young, scared. She told me she hadn't told anyone what happened to her. She said she didn't think anyone would believe her. What did you say? I said I believed her, and I held her while she cried. Victoria's voice was thick with emotion. And I realized, this is why we're here. This is why all of it happened. The pain, the fear, the fight. It was all leading to this moment, to this place, to being able to help someone else. Marcus sat down beside her and took her hand. You're doing something amazing, Victoria. We're doing something amazing. She squeezed his hand. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Sure you could have. No. Victoria shook her head firmly. I wouldn't have survived long enough to try. You saved me, Marcus. Not just from Kane, from myself, from the walls I was building, from the person I was becoming. She leaned against him. You opened the door, and everything else followed. Zoe turned 9 the following summer. The party was held at Mama Rosa's, which had become their unofficial family headquarters. Rosa made enough food for 50 people, even though there were only 12 guests. Marcus's mother brought a cake shaped like a castle. Victoria gave Zoe a set of professional art supplies that made the little girl's eyes go wide. These are for real artists, Zoe exclaimed. You are a real artist, Victoria said. Your drawings are displayed in my office in the foundation's lobby and in the bedroom of every hotel suite I personally designed. Zoe threw her arms around Victoria's neck. Thank you, Mom. The word hung in the air. Victoria froze. Zoe pulled back her face, suddenly uncertain. Is that okay? Can I call you that? Victoria's eyes filled with tears. That's more than okay, she whispered. That's the best gift you could ever give me. Zoe grinned and hugged her again. Across the room, Marcus watched them, his daughter and his wife, holding each other tight. He thought about the photograph of Keisha on his nightstand, about the life they'd planned, about the future they'd never gotten to have. And he thought about the family he had now, different than what he'd imagined, better than he'd dared to hope. His mother appeared beside him, following his gaze. "You did good, baby," she said quietly. "What do you mean? You could have given up. After Keisha died, you could have closed yourself off, focused only on survival, kept everyone at arm's length." She put her hand on his arm. "Instead, you kept your heart open. And look what it brought you." Marcus looked at Victoria and Zoe, now showing Mama Rosa the art supplies and planning what masterpiece to create first. "Yeah," he said, "look what it brought me." On the anniversary of the day they'd met, Marcus and Victoria returned to the hallway outside Suite 88. It had become their tradition, a private moment, just the two of them, to remember where they'd started. "Hard to believe it's been 4 years," Victoria said. 4 years, 2 months, and 17 days. She laughed. "You're counting. Every single one." They stood in silence for a moment, looking at the door. "I don't have nightmares anymore," Victoria said quietly. "I just realized that. It's been almost a year since the last one." "That's good." "It's more than good. It's a miracle." She turned to face him. "Do you know when they stopped?" "When?" "The night Zoe called me Mom for the first time." Victoria's eyes glistened. "I went to bed that night feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Not just happy, not just safe. Complete. Like all the broken pieces of me had finally found their way back together." Marcus reached out and touched her face. "You're not broken, Victoria. You never were. You were just wounded. And wounds heal. Not always." "No, not always." He traced the line of her jaw. "But yours did. And so did mine." Victoria leaned into his touch. "I keep thinking about that first day," she said. "About what would have happened if things had gone differently. If the guards had arrested you. If I hadn't noticed the scratch on the floor. If I'd let my fear make the decision instead of looking at the truth." "But you didn't." "No, I didn't." She smiled. "Because even then, in the middle of all that chaos, something told me you were worth trusting. I didn't understand it. I couldn't explain it. But I knew." "I knew too," Marcus said. "The moment you told the guards to let me go. The moment you looked at me and saw a person instead of a threat. I knew you were different." "Different how?" "Different enough to matter." He pulled her close. "Different enough to change everything." They held each other in the empty hallway, the way they had so many times before. Two people who had found each other in the wreckage. Two people who had built something beautiful from the ruins. That evening they sat on the rooftop terrace with Zoe between them, watching the sun set over the city. Zoe was sketching in her notebook another castle, another dragon, but this time with 3 figures standing at the gate. "Who are they?" Marcus asked, pointing at the figures. "That's us," Zoe said, matter-of-factly. "Daddy, Mom, and me. The family that guards the castle." Victoria looked at the drawing, at the 3 figures holding hands. "What are we guarding it from?" Zoe shrugged. "Nothing anymore. We already beat the bad guys. Now we just live there and have adventures." Marcus and Victoria exchanged a look over their daughter's head. Adventures. That was exactly the right word. "Hey, Zoe," Victoria said. "Yeah. Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing us as a family before we could see it ourselves." Victoria's voice was soft. "For drawing the future you wanted and believing it would come true." Zoe smiled. "That's what families do. They believe in each other." She went back to her drawing. Marcus put his arm around Victoria. She leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. Below them, the city lights began to flicker on one by one until the whole skyline was glowing. "You know what I've learned," Marcus said quietly. "What?" "That life doesn't always give you what you planned. Sometimes it gives you something different, something you never expected." He kissed the top of her head. "And sometimes, if you're lucky, it's better than anything you could have imagined." Victoria closed her eyes. She thought about the door that had opened 4 years ago, about the fear and the chaos, and the terrible, beautiful accident that had brought them together. She thought about Richard Kane rotting in prison, about the walls she'd built and the man who had walked through them, about the daughter she'd never expected and the love she'd never dared to hope for. She thought about all the survivors who had walked through the doors of the open door, all the stories they'd shared, all the healing that had happened, and she realized that Marcus was right. Life didn't always give you what you planned. Sometimes it gave you exactly what you needed. The sun disappeared below the horizon. The stars came out one by one, scattered across the darkening sky. Zoe fell asleep between them, her sketchbook clutched to her chest, her breathing slow and peaceful. Marcus carried her to bed while Victoria watched from the doorway. When he came back, they stood together at the window looking out at the night. "I love you," Victoria said. "I love you too. Promise me something. Anything. Promise me that no matter what happens, no matter what storms come, no matter what challenges we face, we'll face them together. We'll keep opening doors instead of closing them. We'll keep reaching for each other instead of pulling away." Marcus took her hand. "I promise." Victoria smiled. "Then that's all I need." They stood there in the quiet darkness, hands intertwined, hearts full. A single father who had learned to love again, a billionaire who had learned to trust again, and a little girl who had shown them both that families aren't born, they're built one drawing at a time. Outside, the city hummed with life. Inside, the Johnson family slept peacefully. And somewhere in the hallway of the presidential wing, the door to Suite 88 remained closed, not because it needed to protect anyone anymore, but because the people it had brought together had finally found their way home. Some doors are meant to be opened. Some accidents are meant to happen. And some love stories don't begin with a meeting, they begin with a mistake that turns into a miracle. This was theirs, and it was only the beginning.